Hello and welcome to another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. I'm your host, Chad Marschik. Today, we are at Physiotherapy Professionals here in Springfield, Illinois, and I have a special guest, Darrell Simmermaker, who is a physical therapy assistant here at Physiotherapy, and I've known Darrell for a long time. Our show today is on the industrial athlete, and you are kind of a unique individual because you have a varied background. Not only are you a physical therapy assistant, but you also have a really strong industrial background in terms of working with workers at Toyota. Tell me a little bit about your past and your history.
Well, I've been doing functional capacity evaluations in PT centers and occupational centers for over 25 years now. So, and I've worked a lot with people who have had work-related injuries on the job and working to get them back to work. So I've seen a lot of different jobs, a lot of different vocations. I'm real aware of different mechanics and positions that people use at work.
The industrial athlete, I like the title of the show because it's really interesting that at some point most people have some type of a musculoskeletal problem, whether a clerical worker that sits behind a desk answering a telephone, or whether they happen to be a dock worker loading boxes all day onto a semi-truck and they hurt their back, or you've got somebody who's typing all day long that gets carpal tunnel syndrome, or they've got the upper back kyphosis issue going along with the forward head tilt. So posturally, we have a lot of things that happen at work because of that repetitive nature of whatever we do. So
you see a lot of that in almost any profession, because the majority of things that we do at home and at work are in front of us, and it's even multiplied now, and it's got more intense because now we have phones that we hold in front of us now, we have iPads that we hold in front of us, and the more you have people who are working at computer monitors, everything becomes in front of us, and it just unfortunately changes our posture, where when we were much more industrial people, we didn't have quite as much. We had more work that went in different directions, out to the side, overhead, up and down, instead of just everything being right in front. And like you had mentioned with Toyota, I worked at the Toyota Camry plant for about 3 years. A lot of that work is in front of them because they're working on pieces of the door and pieces of the interior and the wheels and everything. I mean, there's so much that goes on right in front of you in a very small space.
And I know you're no longer working at Toyota. You've been here at Physiotherapy Professionals, which is the only independent physical therapy organization still in Springfield, which I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
You see different types of injuries in the Sangamon County area. What kind of things do you see on a regular basis? I know that you had, at the Toyota plant in Kentucky, you saw a lot of things where they're working in front of them.
Right.
Do you see a lot of lifting injuries? Just tell me a little bit about what you see on a regular basis.
We still see quite a few upper extremity injuries. A lot of shoulders, and in any time you're talking about the industrial athlete, you're talking about a person who is generally working with more weight and larger pieces of, whether it's a parcel or a piece of a machine or anything. So we do see quite a few low back injuries, and that whole thing with the industrial athlete is just, if you're going to be out there and you're going to be working, you've got to kind of take it as this is my job, but I have to train for this job, and that's why it's the industrial athlete.
Well, let's talk about some of the biomechanical flaws that you see. I know that we were talking prior to the show about things we want to discuss. So let's talk about mechanically.
Mechanically, there's a lot of information out there that I think leads people in directions that they don't really need to go. For example, just with if you have someone who has a parcel or a box, and the traditional thought was, well, always keep your center of gravity close to whatever it is.
Right.
So the closer your center is to its center, the less stress it's going to put on you. So if I have a weight here, it's going to have less problems with me than if I have it extended out.
So that horizontal displacement
multiplies
the forces,
the amount of force on my my back or my shoulders or whatever. Traditional thought was to use it like a sumo squat, and they taught this for a long time, that you get your feet as wide as you possibly can and you squat down and you grab it. That's a really uncomfortable position for most people.
For a lot of people, because they're so tight in their adductors, their inner thigh muscles, or they don't have the hamstring length to allow them to get to the proper depth.
So, you know, a lot of the parcel and package companies have taken this to another level, and they've done a really good job because of the number of packages that they handle, and they teach people to spread their feet, and when you go down, they used to tell you you have to have a good base of support, so you got to keep both feet flat. Well, that's not really true.
Okay.
You can go down and still have a good base of support, and as you can see, one heel is going to come up. That's not a problem.
And so much of it, don't you think, though, depends on the size of the package.
Oh,
Not
sure.
only dimensionally, but also the volume, the weight.
Sure.
You know, a 10-pound box that's fairly large is not necessarily a big deal, but if you've got a 100-pound box of the same dimensions, then your mechanics are going to change sometimes based on your own personal abilities.
Yeah, and that's where you have to really be smart about, is it something that you can safely handle by yourself? And most employers are pretty reasonable about that. They know that if they have a parcel that's over X number of inches or it's over X number of pounds, it becomes a shared lift, as opposed to just a single lift, which, you know, the person can go down, they can pick it up, they can keep their back straight, they can keep their head up.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that people tend to lose a lot, because as you see people that get on the job and they fatigue, they tend to not use their legs, they tend to bend over to whatever it is, and it doesn't even have to be a package. I mean, it could be something very simple. It could be a pencil, or it could be a slipper,
A small blue ball on the
or
ground.
a small blue ball. And that doesn't mean you don't use the same kind of mechanics.
Right.
You
I
know?
think people confuse that too. They think that, well, it doesn't weigh anything. It's a paper clip that I dropped.
Right.
And then how many times have you seen somebody bend over to pick up a paper clip and they hurt themselves, and then they go, you know, the week before they went and picked up a 100-pound box, but they used proper biomechanics and they didn't hurt themselves.
Right, right. And I've always told people, I said one of the interesting observations that I had when I had kids was, you know, if they ever
You don't
dropped
have kids anymore?
when they were young.
There you go.
When they were young, I'm
Right.
sorry. When I had young kids, young
Right.
children, if they would drop something on the floor, like a pacifier or a play
Right.
toy or whatever, I just observed it was really interesting, because they would go and they would pick it up like that.
Perfectly.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
well, how did we get to the point where all of a sudden we have to bend over like that to do it, you know?
It's called lazy.
You know, obviously, if that's the way a child's doing it, that's probably the easiest way mechanically to do it.
I've been to some seminars and workshops, and the presenter actually had a video of his daughter just perfectly picking something up off the ground, and a video to the side of, you know, somebody who should know better, that terrible sloppy biomechanics.
Right.
So no, you're exactly right. I think intuitively we know how to do it. That it's a primal pattern, if you think about it, that in terms of a lot of societies around the world, you know, they're constantly, this is how they eat. They're down here and they're just you know, eating, hanging out, talking, having a conversation. This is normal to them. But, you know, and they're 85, 90 years old. But for us to do this, a lot of people over the age of 35, this is difficult.
That's
to
not a
get
comfortable
into that position. It's not
Yeah.
comfortable.
And just like you said before, with hamstring length and hip flexor lengths and things of that nature, I mean, it becomes uncomfortable for them because they've been doing things the wrong way for so long.
Right.
And they've developed those bad habits that they really need to work into them. One of the things that I've used in the past a lot, when I've talked to employers and I've talked to workers about mechanics, is for them just to, we'll just use this, we'll say this is a broomstick, it's just a straight rod is all it is. But if you take this and you put it on your back, just move that for me, please. And if I touch it to my tailbone, if I squat down and I do it mechanically correct, it'll stay there.
Mm-hmm.
The
dowel rod will stay there.
The stick will not leave my back or my head. Now, if for some reason my mechanics deteriorate,
right,
and I start to go down, well, there goes
the dowel rod.
There goes the bend.
Yeah.
And at that point, I know that my mechanics are not good, and I need to work on them. So that's a real easy tip that somebody can use at home.
Mm-hmm.
If they're thinking about,
they can take a broomstick handle if they wanted to practice that.
Anything that's straight, you could put it on your back, and you can kind of look at how your mechanics are. If you get yourself to do something, see if it comes up, see if it comes off.
I think also what's interesting in terms of the shape of the acetabulum, where the big long bone, the femur, that femoral head fits into that joint, and everybody's joint changes over time, and congenitally it can be quite different from person to person.
Sure.
So that's also going to dictate in terms of the position of your legs and how your ability to move properly. Yeah. What about we talked about a lot of lifting mechanics. And obviously that affects the entire body from head to toe. I mean, you can use bad lifting mechanics and hurt your shoulder. But typically you're going to see injuries to probably the lumbar spine primarily, maybe mid-back a little bit, sometimes to the hips. Let's talk about, say, lower extremity, even lower, ankle, knee, hip. What type of mechanical things do you see in terms of injury? What kind of injuries are you seeing? Do you see a lot of meniscus tears? ACL issues are usually some type of contact. Or maybe you get somebody who's slipping. But talk about the role that the hips play in stability too, not only protecting the lumbar spine, but also below that.
Well, I think a lot of the injuries that we see occupationally are more knee than hip.
Okay.
The hip is a pretty stable joint. For people at work, they tend to not put a lot of stress on it, and I think the majority of the knee problems that we see are kind of fluke accidents. It's just something that happens. It's, I had a guy recently, he hit his knee on a post, tore an ACL.
Ouch.
And you have things like that happen. You have drivers that jump out of a truck, injure a knee, injure an ankle. You have people who walk a lot for a living that, an ankle gets turned or twisted.
A postman.
Yeah, it could be a postal carrier or something like that. But, with the lumbar spine, it's the base of support, obviously, in the torso area, your core strength and stability, but it's also everything is connected.
Sure.
So if your legs are weak, if your knees are weak, then something is going to try and help out. Something's going to become more involved than it needs to be, and something's going to suffer from the breakdown in that chain.
Okay.
And at that time, you'll see some problems with the low back.
How important of a role do footwear? What about footwear and shoes, and the type of footwear people choose to wear, regardless of where they work? How dialed in should their footwear be?
I think it's incredibly important. I mean, you never see a runner with cheap shoes on.
Okay, true. I'm guilty of that.
Right. The type of footwear that you have should be geared towards your occupation. If you need ankle stability, you need a taller boot.
Okay.
And just making sure that you have the right footwear that is giving you adequate traction, adequate stabilization in the ankle area, so that it's not putting stress on your knees because there's a weak link there.
Do people typically wear their shoes too long, just like they drive on tires maybe a bit too long, try to get a little bit more out of them?
I think everybody's guilty of that. It's easy to look at the bottom of your shoes and tell if they're worn. And
so for most people, a lot of it, the wear patterns depends on the load, what they're doing. If they're seated at a desk, then obviously they're not putting as much wear and tear on their shoes. But if they're shuffling or walking or lifting or moving a lot, then it's a little bit more, the wear pattern may be faster.
It could break down quicker, sure. And,
okay.
Excuse me. I just think people need to be really, like you said, dialed into what they are putting on their feet. It's not always the best option to have a cheaper shoe.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Especially if you're gonna ask that shoe to do something for you. You know, if you expect it to support you, if you expect it to keep you from slipping, you know, you need to look at the appropriate shoe or boot.
Those are good points about footwear. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about some of the things that people can do at home or at work to maybe prevent some of the common things that you see here at physiotherapy professionals.
Back-wise, with lumbar and low back injuries, a lot of it is just, you know, good mechanics like we talked about.
Right.
It's, you know, take the dowel and use it. The other thing is the golfer lift. You know, you've always seen golfers out there, and they always have the putter in their hand when they grab the ball out of the
hole.
Why do they do that?
Yeah.
Well, because that takes pressure off the low back, and when they let that other leg go, you take more pressure off the low back.
Sure.
So it's just common sense things that you don't stand and you don't bend with your feet together. And if you are going to lift, you always lift with it as close as you possibly can. And you make sure that everything's going the same direction. So I want my feet going the same direction as my hips, same direction as my shoulders. Anytime I start to twist with weight and get the spine and the shoulders and the hips and the feet out of line, then I'm more susceptible to injury.
It's got that torsion going on.
So keep everything going the same direction, you know. Go straight ahead, and if you have to change direction, and then go.
Right, so if something's behind you and kind of in an awkward position, you're not going to necessarily come back like this and try to grab that load. You want to actually face the load. You want square it up with your toes, your hips, if your hips were headlights.
Right.
You know, you want those headlights pointing in the same direction as your toe headlights and your shoulder headlights.
Just think everything going the same direction.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Clerical workers, or, you know, there are a lot of, I work with so many physicians that have upper extremity issues because they're like this operating all day or looking in someone's eyes or etc. Just, you know, and they have all kinds of neck issues because of that anterior head position because they're craning to see what they're doing.
And we had talked a little bit about this before the show, and if we come over to the wall,
yeah,
the typical thing that I'll have somebody do is just to sit against the wall. Just lightly sit against the wall. Now you should be able to get your shoulders back and you should be able to get your head back. And for some people, that's going to be a really uncomfortable position.
Why?
If you've got that forward head, if you've got that kyphotic back, if your shoulders are forward.
So talk about the kyphotic. Some people don't, what does that mean?
The kyphosis is just, it's the curvature of the back, and it's where you're bringing your shoulders forward.
Okay, and so the upper spine, the thoracic spine,
you're losing,
assumes that curved position.
You're losing the normal curve, and it's a more curved position where you're not at the hump, but you're going that direction.
Sure.
Okay, and you know, not uncommon at all to see people that get against the wall and can't even get their head back against the wall. Because they've been in that posture for so long, and it takes a long time to get there. It's not easy to get out of either, but you have, if you want to be comfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable to get back into this position and get everything back to where it should be.
And that's a good point. It's going to be uncomfortable to get in, to try to get into that natural position. So people need to get comfortable being uncomfortable with trying to correct something from a postural standpoint. Something as simple as leaning against the wall, getting your pelvis against the wall, drawing your abs in a little bit, making sure your shoulder blades are against the wall, tucking that chin, making sure the back of the head's in contact. Opening up stretches your pecs, opens up your chest, kind of realigns your cervical spine.
And we had talked about the typical snow angel too, for people that have that you know, that I hate to say, it's just that computer monitor in front of them all the time, and that's where their life is.
Sure.
You got to get out of that position, and you just do the snow angel on the wall.
So this is an actual exercise that our viewers could do this at home, really simple. How many reps could they do?
You know, I tell
Or should they do?
I tell people just start out with doing a minute a day.
Minute a day, okay.
You know, and all you're going to do is you're going to raise your arms, hold them for a few seconds, and let it down, because it is going to be uncomfortable. You know, and I'm not overly flexible, but you should be able to get your arms up to a reasonable level without your hands pulling away from the wall.
Sure. So just getting that rhythm back and through the mid-back, making sure things...
Just start with a minute a day and then go to 2 minutes a day, you know.
Are there any other like wall exercises or simple things that a clerical worker could get out of their, you know, get out from behind their desk, go to the wall, so they could do that? What about facing the wall and, you know, stretching like the pecs that way or anything?
A corner stretch is a really good one, where you just stand in a corner and you put your elbows and your hands on the corner, and then you just lean into the corner. Very similar to what we do with the wall stretch, a little bit different mechanics, but that's a good thing as well. And then they can always do some upper back strengthening, you know, like the things that you guys do at Body Symmetry, to start bringing all of that forward posture back. You start doing upper back and upper shoulder movements and kind of strengthen those muscles to help support the flexibility that you're asking it to do.
Right. Even in a chair seated at your desk at work or at home, oftentimes you can use the back of that upper chair if you're, you know, if you're seated, and if you've got the back that comes up to the mid-back, even just leaning over that and opening up this way will
could absolutely
extend the thoracic spine, open up the chest, keeping that neutral and slightly leaning back with your head, but not throwing your head up like this where everything gets long in the front. Not necessarily a good idea, but that's something really simple and basic to do.
And that was a good point as well. I think a lot of people, when they try to do good posture with their head, they think that it should either go up or go down, and it should not. It should go straight back.
Straight back. So actually doing a chin tuck, and can you actually demonstrate that?
Sure.
Against the
chin
wall?
tuck is just, you're here and you're just tucking your chin in, and you're just literally sliding the chin back.
So if you've got that computer desk look where the head's, you know, far forward like that, then again, that neutral position, tucking the chin, holding that for a set amount of time, say 30 seconds or a minute, or doing a series of, say, what, 10 to 15 reps?
Sure.
Or hold each one, say, for a 5 count?
5 second.
Yeah, but that neutral position is absolutely key. Not coming up like this, like you said, or down. Right. It's like your head's on a carriage and you have to slide that carriage back.
Slide it back.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit. I think this is really important, that people do not know how to stand up. Sit down on the toilet, or we take that for granted, but a lot of people, they cannot get into position into a chair properly, even to, you know, where do they put their legs? Where do they put their feet?
You know, unfortunately, a lot of that is loss of lower leg strength, and we see that a lot with people who have difficulty getting up and down out of a chair. It's just because they're losing lower leg strength. Generally, you're going to be better suited if you have a staggered stance, because if you have the stance with the feet that are right together, it's difficult to go up and down. Where if it's a staggered stance, then, you know, I'm right back to the lifting now.
Yeah,
again.
you really are.
I mean, we're talking about what we were talking before. You know, get a nice base of support, keep your body centered, and that's how you're going to stand up and sit down easier.
Okay. A lot of good information. Darrell, I just want to touch on, again, physiotherapy professionals really quickly about if you guys have free screenings here, right?
We do. We do.
Free. How does that? Tell me how that works.
You would just call in and get an appointment to come in for a screen, and we would have one of the therapists talk to you and talk about what's going on with you, what kind of injury or pain or whatever it is that you feel is going on, and then we can kind of go from there.
Okay. And again, a lot of people don't know, Physiotherapy Professionals is actually a physical therapy company.
Correct.
They've got 3 full-time physical therapists, 3 full-time physical therapy assistants, and then a humongous support staff.
Right, and we have, and these are great therapists here, because like myself, not only am I a physical therapy assistant, I have a master's in exercise physiology, and one of the other PTAs has a master's as well. So you're talking about people who have a lot of experience in more than one area going for them.
Yeah, very well trained. I send pretty much all of my personal training clients that come through Body Symmetry to physiotherapy professionals, especially for people I know that need help, because you guys have a tendency not to screw things up, and you get to the cut to the chase quickly.
Yeah.
And people don't have time to waste, and you take all insurance here too. A lot of people are confused by that. They take everything. So this is the place to go if you have an injury. If you have a musculoskeletal, problem, a concern, then, give them a call here. Check them out. They're really good. And we're going to show your website, physiotherapyprofessionals.com, here. Probably now. Brian's going to insert that. And then the other thing that you own West of Wise Winery, and I know you have in Petersburg, Illinois.
We do.
And tell me about the race that's coming up.
We have a 5K run that's coming up on April 29th. It starts at the winery, which is near Petersburg, right before you get to New Salem.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about the race is it's a part road, part trail run. Mm-hmm. It goes through part of New Salem State Park, goes down by the river. Nice time of year to have it, hopefully cool in the spring, not wet, but just starts and ends at the winery. Mm-hmm. So it's just been last year was our first year, and it's just a fun race.
It was a good time. I was there last year. I think I helped out with that, and I was able to drink a little wine too, which you guys do a nice job producing wine, and I always enjoy coming to see my friend Darrell at West of Wise Winery, and also at Physiotherapy Professionals. Yeah. So thanks for doing the show with me today. I really appreciate it. You did a great job,
Thank you,
Darrell.
Chad.
Thank you so much.
Nice to be with you.
Appreciate it. If you have any questions about our program today, The Industrial Athlete, feel free to give me a call or call Physiotherapy Professionals by all means if you have, again, an injury that you need to address. Thanks again for joining me on another edition of Personal Health and Fitness. Until next time, I'm your host, Chad Marschik. Hey, Quinn and Riley.